The thermometer on the dashboard read 116 when Victor killed the engine, not the air temperature. That was 110, which the radio had announced with the bored calm of a man reading lottery numbers nobody won. 110 degrees at 6 in the evening. The dashboard thermometer was reading the surface heat baking off the parking lot asphalt, which had been absorbing radiation since dawn and now pulsed like a low-grade fever under his boots as he stepped out of the van. Victor Ruiz had spent 12 hours on rooftops, not regular rooftops. Commercial rooftops in the West Phoenix sprawl, flat, tar-papered expanses that absorbed so much heat by midday, the soles of his work boots had begun to warp and soften, leaving shallow impressions in the material like footprints on a black beach. The digital thermometer he carried for calibrating units had clocked the surface at 152 degrees on the last roof, a strip mall dental office on Indian School Road where the RTU had seized up and died because someone had let the condenser coils cake with cottonwood fluff and never once scheduled a cleaning. 12 hours, 4 rooftops, 2 compressor replacements, 1 condenser fan motor. And a partridge in a pear tree, he thought, though the thought had no humor left in it, just the mechanical rhythm of a man who talked to himself in his own head, because the alternative was silence, and the silence was worse. His forearms were the color of brick, a permanent condition that no amount of sunscreen would reverse. The dermatologist he couldn't afford had once told him, during a free screening at a community health fair, that he had the skin of a man 15 years older. "Sun damage," she'd said, like he'd done it on purpose, like he'd chosen to spend 10 years crawling across the scalding rooftops of the most brutally sun-punished city in America, because it was a lifestyle preference, and not because it was the only trade that had been hiring when he'd arrived from Indiana at 22 with a GED and a willingness to sweat. His back seized as he reached for his work bag, a sharp electric jolt from the L4 vertebra down through his right hip, the kind of pain that made his vision go white at the edges. He braced a hand on the van's quarter panel and waited it out. 30 seconds, 40. The spasm released. He breathed. The house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac in Maryvale, a neighborhood that had been up and coming when the realtor said it in 2006 and was now just coming apart. It was a stucco box, single-story, 1,400 square feet. They'd bought it for $220,000 with a no-money-down, adjustable-rate mortgage from a lender whose name Victor couldn't even remember now, because the company had gone bankrupt in 2008, along with every other predatory outfit that had handed 6-figure loans to young couples with combined incomes that couldn't service half the debt. The house was now worth, according to the county assessor, approximately $110,000. They owed $205,000. The math was not complicated. The math was a trap with no door. Across the street, the Nollins house sat dark, had been dark for 7 months, a bank notice on the door, sun-bleached to near illegibility. 2 doors down, the Garcia's place, same story, different bank. At the far end of the block, a house with no front door at all, just a plywood board and a spray-painted code from the city inspector. Someone had stolen the copper pipes out of the walls 3 weeks ago. Victor had heard the noise at 3 a.m. and hadn't called the police because what was the point? The police had bigger problems. Everyone had bigger problems. He unlocked his own front door and stepped inside. Dark, hot, still. The thermostat on the hallway wall read 91 degrees. The AC was technically functional. Victor had serviced it himself, a 10-year-old train unit that he kept running through sheer professional stubbornness and a supply of salvaged parts. It worked fine, but Kelsey kept it set to 85 when no one was visiting. 85. In a Phoenix summer, in a house with west-facing windows that caught the full brunt of the afternoon sun. When guests came over, she'd drop it to 76, as if comfort were a performance and Victor wasn't the audience that mattered. The house was empty. Kelsey's car wasn't in the driveway, probably at her mother's, probably at the store. Probably anywhere that wasn't here, in this dark and sweltering box that smelled like stale carpet and the faint chemical residue of the plug-in air fresheners she bought in bulk, despite there being $17 a pack and completely pointless. Victor didn't turn on the lights. He peeled off his shirt, dropped it on the kitchen floor, and drank from the faucet. The water was warm. The pipes ran through the attic, and in summer the first 30 seconds of any faucet in Phoenix produced water that was nearly hot enough to brew tea. He let it run until it cooled, then drank until his stomach cramped. He collapsed on the couch. The leather, fake leather, bonded polyurethane, bought on credit from a furniture store that had also since gone bankrupt, stuck to his bare back. He stared at the ceiling fan. It turned slowly, doing nothing. Outside, the Santa Cruz wash was bone dry. It had been bone dry for months. The whole city was bone dry. The whole city was burning and broke and pretending it wasn't. Victor closed his eyes. He couldn't sleep. The heat sat on his chest like a hand. Not pressing hard, just resting there, reminding him that it owned the night the same way it owned the day. His back throbbed in slow, rhythmic pulses that matched his heartbeat. His skin felt tight and hot, like he was still on the roof, like the roof had followed him home and draped itself over him. At 1:47 a.m. he gave up. He got out of bed, the spare bedroom, which he'd been sleeping in for 3 weeks now, ever since Kelsey had started complaining that his tossing and turning kept her awake, though he suspected the real reason was that she simply didn't want him there and walked down the hall in his boxers. Occupational habit. When Victor couldn't sleep, he checked equipment. It was a compulsion, the way some men checked locks or counted inventory. He wanted to make sure the AC compressor was cycling properly, that the fan was pulling air, that nothing had seized or shorted. It was his system, his responsibility, the one thing in this house that still responded to his expertise. The spare bedroom also housed his other piece of functional equipment, a Swan DVR security camera system he'd bought on clearance at Costco for $199 after the Nolan's house got broken into and the copper stripped out of the walls. 4 cameras, a 500-gigabyte hard drive, a small 9-inch monitor. He'd wired it himself one Saturday afternoon, 1 camera on the front porch, 1 on the driveway, 1 covering the side yard where the AC compressor sat, 1 on the back patio. The system was closed circuit, no internet connection, no phone alerts, no app, no smart anything. It recorded on a 72-hour loop, overwriting the oldest footage automatically. Dumb, cheap, reliable, like Victor. He sat down in front of the monitor. The screen glowed a sickly blue-green. He toggled through the feeds. Driveway empty. Kelsey's car was there now, which meant she'd come home while he was already asleep. Back patio, nothing. Side yard, the compressor unit sat undisturbed, the fan spinning lazily. Good. Front porch. Victor reached for the rewind button, a reflex. He wanted to see when Kelsey had come home. A small, pathetic piece of information that he told himself he didn't need but reached for anyway, because the distance between them had become a thing he tracked in arrivals and departures, in timestamps and absences, the way a scientist tracks the orbit of something that's slowly drifting away. He rewound 45 minutes. The feed was black and white, grainy, washed out by the infrared night mode that turned everything into a surveillance photo from a gas station robbery. Low resolution. No audio. The image flickered slightly, a refresh rate artifact from the cheap camera sensor. At the 1:14 a.m. mark, the front door opened. A figure stepped out. Male, tall, athletic build. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd made this exit before, someone who knew which porch boards creaked and how far the camera's field of view extended, though he clearly didn't know about the camera at all, because he walked directly through the center of the frame with his face angled toward the street lamp. Behind him, in the doorway, Kelsey. She was wearing the silk robe. The dark one, with the pattern that looked like water. The one she'd told Victor she lost 4 months ago, the one she said must have gotten mixed in with a Goodwill donation bag by accident. The one that Victor had bought her for their 3rd anniversary. And that had cost him $80 he didn't have because she'd seen it in a magazine and mentioned it twice, which in Kelsey's language meant she expected it. She was wearing the robe and she was kissing the man goodbye. The kiss was not brief. Victor watched it. His body didn't move. His hands didn't shake. His breath didn't catch. Something deeper happened, something structural, like a load-bearing wall developing a crack that wouldn't show on the surface for months, but had already changed the building's capacity to stand. He watched the man pull away. He watched Kelsey lean in the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the man walk down the path. Then the man kicked the garden gnome. It was a small thing, a stupid thing. a painted concrete gnome that Travis, Victor's apprentice, had given them as a housewarming gift 2 years ago. Travis was 22 and earnest and had wrapped the gnome in newspaper and presented it with a sincerity so genuine that Victor had put it on the front walkway immediately, even though Kelsey had said it was tacky and wanted it in the trash. The man kicked it the way you kick a pebble, casually, without breaking stride. The gnome toppled off the walkway into the gravel. And that not the kiss, not the robe, not the open door at 1 a.m., was what made Victor's hands grip the edge of the desk until his knuckles went white. The disrespect, the smallness of it, the way this man walked out of Victor's house, past Victor's cameras, down Victor's walkway, and kicked Victor's things with the lazy contempt of someone who didn't consider Victor a real obstacle. A real man, a real anything. Victor breathed, controlled, measured. He did not go downstairs. He rewound the footage again. Watched the man walk toward the street. Under the amber cone of the street lamp, the one the city had been promising to replace with an LED for 2 years, a car was parked at the curb. Light-colored. Sedan. The DVR's crude digital zoom couldn't resolve the plate. The pixels dissolved into gray mush when he tried, but the shape was clear. The profile. The kidney grill front end that every BMW owner thought made them look European and successful. Victor had seen that car before. Every Tuesday and Thursday, parked in the lot at the gym on 7th Street. The gym where Victor serviced the commercial HVAC under a maintenance contract. The light-colored 3 Series, always parked diagonally across 2 spots as if the asphalt owed it extra space. He saved the timestamp, wrote it on the back of a receipt from his pocket. 1:14 a.m. Then he sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the compressor cycle on and off, like a mechanical heartbeat in the wall of a house that no longer felt like his. 6 in the morning. The sun didn't rise in Phoenix. It reported for duty. It came up fast and angry over the McDowell Mountains and immediately got to work on the pavement, the stucco, the roof tiles, the skin of anyone foolish enough to stand in its path without shade. By 6:15, the light through the kitchen window was already harsh and flat, the color of old paper, and Victor sat at the table with a mug of instant coffee that had gone lukewarm because he'd been staring at it instead of drinking it. The kitchen was small. Laminate countertops, a dishwasher that Victor had fixed twice, and that still leaked if you ran the heavy cycle, a refrigerator covered in magnets from places they'd never been, Sedona, San Diego, Cabo, bought at gift shops during day trips that Kelsey had insisted on because she needed photos for what Victor mentally called the performance. The ongoing, full-time production of a life that looked better than it was. The coffee was Folgers. The mug had the logo of a supply house where Victor bought refrigerant. Kelsey's mug, when she appeared, would be a ceramic thing she'd ordered online that said, "But first, coffee," in gold script. She'd paid $14 for it. Victor knew because he'd seen the charge on the statement. $14 for a mug, in a house where the mortgage was 3 months behind. Kelsey entered the kitchen at 6:22. She was performing. Victor could see it immediately, the way a mechanic can hear a bad bearing before anyone else in the room notices the noise. She yawned with her whole body, stretching her arms overhead, arching her back. She made a sound that was half groan, half sigh. She padded to the coffee maker in bare feet and poured from the pot Victor had brewed, adding 2 tablespoons of name-brand hazelnut creamer that cost $6 a bottle. "God, I slept forever," she said. "I think I was out before 10. Did you hear me snoring? I was so dead." Dead, an interesting word choice. Victor looked at her neck. Below the left ear, extending down toward the collarbone, a bruise, not large but not small. She'd applied concealer, the drugstore kind, the shade slightly too orange for her skin, blended with the kind of haste that suggested she'd done it in the bathroom mirror with one eye on the clock. "You sleep okay?" Victor asked. "Like the dead," she said again, and the repetition told him she'd rehearsed it. The naturalness of her lie was extraordinary. No micro-expression, no eye shift, no vocal waver. She lied the way other people breathed automatically without apparent effort or cost. She sat across from him and talked about work. About a patient at the dental office, a woman from Scottsdale whose veneers were absolutely perfect, like, "I would literally kill for those teeth." About a coworker named Dana who was so annoying because she brought fish for lunch and microwaved it in the break room. About traffic. About her mother. About nothing. Victor watched her mouth move. The lips, the teeth, the jaw working around words that carried no information and no truth. He felt like he was watching her through the 9-inch security monitor, grainy, distant, a figure moving through a frame that he could observe but not enter. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, put it in the rack. "I've gotta go," he said. "Already? You just got up." "Gym on 7th Street. "Service call. On a Saturday? Emergency call, extra pay." She shrugged, lost interest, turned back to her phone. Victor did go to the gym on 7th Street, but not for a service call. He parked the van, a white 2004 Chevy Express with the company logo on the side, 187,000 miles on the odometer, an alignment pulled to the right that he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months across the lot, under the partial shade of a Apollo verd tree that was too thin to provide real cover but made him feel less exposed. The BMW was there, light-colored, a 3 Series. Parked diagonally across 2 spots near the entrance, as if proximity to the front door was a status symbol in a strip mall parking lot in central Phoenix. The car was immaculate, waxed, detailed, the kind of clean that required either professional maintenance or a level of personal vanity that bordered on devotion. A leased car, Victor guessed. Nobody who actually owned a BMW kept it that clean. People who owned things understood wear and tear. People who leased things were performing ownership the same way Kelsey performed happiness. He waited 40 minutes. During those 40 minutes, Victor watched 3 other people enter and leave the gym. A heavy man in a tank top who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. A woman in expensive leggings carrying a yoga mat and a smoothie. A kid, maybe 19, with headphones the size of dinner plates and the anxious energy of someone who just started lifting and was afraid everyone was watching him. Nobody was watching him. Nobody watched anyone in Phoenix. Everyone was too hot and too broke and too focused on their own slow-motion disasters. At 7:44, the front door opened and Spencer walked out. Victor knew his first name from the gym's front desk chatter. Spencer, the personal trainer. The guy the female clients liked because he was handsome in that specific, curated way, jawline, cheekbones, shoulders that filled a compression shirt like the shirt had been tailored. He carried a gym bag and a protein shake in a blender bottle. He wore sunglasses that cost more than Victor's weekly grocery budget. Spencer was the man who, 6 months ago, during a service call when Victor was on his knees replacing a condensate pump in the gym's utility room, had walked past the open door with a client and said, loud enough for Victor to hear, "Yeah, that's just the maintenance guy." Not the HVAC technician, not the contractor. The maintenance guy, said with a sneer that wasn't quite a sneer, that lived in the space between casual and cruel, the kind of dismissal that costs nothing to deliver and everything to receive. Victor had said nothing then, had finished the pump, had packed his tools, had driven to the next call. Spencer walked to the BMW, got in. Checked his hair in the rearview mirror, actually adjusted individual strands, studying his own reflection with the focus of a man who believed his face was his primary professional asset, which it was. Then he backed out, swung the BMW in a wide, unnecessary arc and drove away. Victor sat in the van for another 5 minutes, hands on the wheel, staring at the empty parking spot. Then he drove to the gym for real. The front desk girl, a college student named Amy who chewed gum with metronomic consistency, buzzed him through. "The unit in the back office is cycling warm again," she said. "Randy said you'd know what to look at." He did know. It was a 3-ton split system with a history of low refrigerant, probably a slow leak in the evaporator coil that he'd flagged twice, and that the gym's owner, Randy, had twice declined to pay to fix because Randy was also underwater on his commercial lease and was cutting every corner that could be cut. Victor worked on the unit, checked the charge, added a pound of R410A. Noted the leak in his service report again, knowing it would be ignored again. While he worked, he was in the back office, 3 feet from the manager's desktop computer. The screen was on. The screensaver hadn't kicked in. The membership database, a Club OS interface, the kind of basic gym management software that 1,000 small fitness operations across the valley used, was open and logged in under the manager's credentials. Victor glanced at it. He typed Spencer into the search field. 1 result. Spencer Caldwell, member since 2009. Independent contractor, personal trainer. Home address 3441 East Indian School Road, Unit 7. Phone number. Emergency contact, none listed. Victor memorized the address and the phone number. He didn't write them down. He closed the search result and went back to the refrigerant gauges. He knew it was a privacy violation. He knew Marcus, his oldest friend, a lawyer who operated out of a strip mall office on Camelback, and who had once spent 45 minutes lecturing Victor about the legal concept of fruit of the poisonous tree over $2 beers, would tell him this was the kind of thing that could blow up a court case. Information obtained improperly. Evidence gathered without standing. The kind of shortcut that felt smart in the moment and became a liability under cross-examination. He did it anyway, because the alternative was knowing nothing, and knowing nothing was the thing that had gotten him here, to a dark house and a silent marriage, and a garden gnome kicked over in the night by a man who drove a leased car and called Victor, the maintenance guy. That evening, he stopped at the Circle K on 51st Avenue. The store was fluorescent and cold, a shock after the parking lot heat that hit like opening an oven. Victor walked past the hot dog rollers, past the fountain drink station where a teenage kid was filling a 44-ounce cup with Mountain Dew, past the rack of sunglasses and phone chargers, to the locked case where the prepaid phones hung on plastic hooks like small, cheap promises. Track phone, $19.99, $20 minutes of talk time included. No contract, no name. No connection to Victor Ruiz or his cell number or his home address or anything that was legally, verifiably him. He paid cash. The clerk didn't look up. In the van, in the Circle K parking lot, with the engine running and the AC blasting recirculated air that smelled like old filter and metal, Victor activated the phone. It took 4 minutes. He read the instructions twice. Then he typed a text message to Spencer Caldwell's number. "Nice seeing you at 2 a.m. I have a business proposition. Coffee, tomorrow 9 a.m. the grinder on McDowell. I'm bringing a gift." He read it 3 times, changed nothing, pressed send. Then he turned off the track phone, put it in the glove compartment behind a stack of invoices and a tire pressure gauge, and drove home. He slept in the spare bedroom, 4 feet from the DVR monitor. The compressor cycled on and off outside. The house ticked and settled in the heat. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing, or at everything, or at the particular frequency of desperation that hung over Merivale like a second atmosphere. Victor stared at the ceiling and waited for morning. The grinder sat in a strip mall on McDowell Road, wedged between a nail salon called Paradise Nails and a check cashing place called EZ Cash Express that had bars on the windows and a handwritten sign advertising money orders 99 cents. The coffee shop's exterior was painted a dark brown that had faded to the color of milk chocolate in the sun. A sandwich board on the sidewalk read, "Cold brew $3" in chalk that was half erased by the morning wind. Inside, the place was narrow and cool, with mismatched furniture and a counter made from reclaimed wood that still had nail holes in it. The barista was a woman in her 40s with a sleeve tattoo of desert wildflowers and a name tag that said Peg. She poured coffee with the efficiency of a person who'd been doing it since before coffee became a personality trait. Victor arrived at 8:30. He ordered a black coffee, $2. He sat at the corner table with his back to the wall. He was still in his work clothes, not because he didn't own other clothes, but because the uniform was the point. The dirty tan shirt with the company logo faded on the chest. The work boots scuffed and warped. The belt with the Leatherman multi-tool clipped to the right side. He wanted Spencer to see exactly who Victor was, not a threat, not a rival. A working man, a man with tools and calluses and a van with 187,000 miles. A man who did not belong in Spencer's mental category of people who mattered. That was the weapon. Spencer would underestimate him. Spencer had been underestimating him since the day he called Victor the maintenance guy. Victor was counting on it. Marcus arrived at 8:40. Marcus Ockhaffer had the appearance of a man who had given up on impressing anyone approximately 5 years ago and had found the experience liberating. He wore a rumpled, short-sleeved dress shirt that was missing the second button from the top. His tie was loosened to the point of being decorative rather than functional. He carried a leather briefcase that was cracked along the spine and held together, Victor suspected, by habit and static friction. Marcus was a solo practice attorney whose office was in a strip mall on Camelback Road, between a taqueria and a state farm agent. His specialty, if you could call it that, was DUI defense, a lucrative niche in Arizona where the DUI laws were among the harshest in the country. First offense, mandatory jail time. Second offense, worse. Arizona didn't play around with drunk driving, and the steady supply of people who made bad decisions at 1 a.m. on Scottsdale Road kept Marcus's rent paid. The rest of his caseload was petty disputes, small claims, the occasional restraining order. He was not a divorce attorney. But he was cheap, smart, and the only lawyer Victor trusted, which in Victor's current situation counted for more than a specialty. "You look terrible," Marcus said, sitting down. "I was on a roof until 7 last night. I meant emotionally." Victor slid a coffee across the table, black, 2 sugars. Marcus looked at it. "You remembered." "I remember everything, that's the problem." Marcus opened his cracked briefcase and removed a manila folder. Inside, the documents Victor had given him 2 days ago, the foreclosure warning notice, the credit card statements, the bank records. He placed the folder on the table between them and left his hand on it like a man resting his hand on a Bible before testimony. "Where is he?" Marcus asked. "He'll be here." At 9:07, Spencer Caldwell walked through the door of the grinder and the temperature of the room changed. Not literally. The AC was working fine. Victor had checked the ceiling vents automatically upon entering, an occupational reflex that would never leave him. But there was a shift. Spencer entered a room the way a certain kind of man enters every room, scanning for threats, scanning for mirrors, scanning for the audience he assumed was always watching. He wore a fitted black t-shirt that probably cost $60, designer sunglasses pushed up on his head, jeans that were too tight for a Tuesday morning. He smelled like cologne, a cloud of it that preceded him by 3 feet and lingered after he passed. He was nervous. Victor could see it in the way his jaw worked, the slight rapid blinking, the way his right hand kept touching his left wrist as if checking for a watch that wasn't there. Spencer was a man who understood on some animal level that the text message he'd received was a threat. But his arrogance, the deep structural arrogance of a man who had always gotten by on his face, told him the threat was manageable. Probably a jealous husband who wanted to throw a punch or demand money. Spencer had dealt with jealous husbands before. This was, Victor would later realize, not Spencer's first time being the man who kicked the gnome. Spencer scanned the room. His eyes landed on Victor, recognition, then confusion. Then a flicker of something Victor savored, the realization that the maintenance guy was the husband. "Sit down," Victor said. Spencer sat. He didn't order coffee. He looked at Marcus, then at Victor, then at the manila folder. "Who's this?" Spencer asked, nodding toward Marcus. "My consultant," Victor said. Marcus didn't smile. Didn't extend a hand. He just sat there with his fingers on the folder, looking like a man who had seen every possible version of human stupidity walk through his strip mall office door, and was no longer surprised by any of it. "Look," Spencer began, leaning forward with the practiced confidence of a man about to negotiate his way out of a situation. "I don't know what you think." "I don't think anything," Victor said. "I know I have cameras." Silence. Spencer's jaw stopped working. His right hand dropped to the table. Victor didn't show the footage. He didn't need to. The word cameras was enough. People always imagined worse footage than what actually existed, and the DVR's grainy, low-resolution black-and-white recording was far less damning than what Spencer was currently projecting onto his own mental screen. "So what do you want?" Spencer asked, and his voice had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by the tight, transactional tone of a man calculating costs. "Money." Because Victor slid the paper across the table. Spencer looked down. He expected a demand, a number, a lawsuit. What he saw was a foreclosure warning notice from a bank addressed to Victor and Kelsey Ruiz for a property in Maryvale. Below it, a bank statement showing $40,000 in credit card debt across 4 accounts, all in Kelsey's name, all maxed. Spencer stared at the numbers. His mouth opened slightly. He looked like a man who had opened a gift box expecting a watch and found a rattlesnake. "She told you I was the one with the money, didn't she?" Victor said. His voice was quiet, not threatening, not angry, just flat like a field after a fire. "That I was the stable one, the provider, the guy with the house and the job and the savings account." She told you I was the mark. Spencer said nothing. She's looking for a lifeboat, Spencer. She's been looking for one since the house went underwater, but the boat has a hole in it. You understand, if you take her, you take all of this. Victor tapped the foreclosure notice. Arizona is a community property state. Marcus nodded once, slowly, letting the legal weight settle over the table like a change in air pressure. The implication that Spencer could somehow absorb Kelsey's debt through association, through marriage, through whatever fairy tale Kelsey had been constructing was legally soft. Marcus knew it. Community property applied to debts incurred during a marriage, not to a girlfriend's pre-existing credit card balances. But Spencer didn't know it. Spencer was a man who leased a BMW and couldn't define amortization. The bluff was safe. Spencer's face drained. The tan, the carefully maintained color of a man who probably used bronzer seemed to pull back from his skin, revealing something pale and startled underneath. I didn't, he started, stopped, started again. She said you had savings. She said you were sitting on money from your family. She told me. What did she tell you? The dam broke. Spencer talked. Once he started, Victor realized the man couldn't stop because Spencer had the moral architecture of a paper bag, and when you applied pressure, the whole thing crumpled and everything spilled out. Kelsey had told Spencer that Victor was comfortable, that the house was paid off, that Victor had a retirement account from a union job. None of it true, all of it designed. She told Spencer about a fitness app, idea Spencer had. Victor didn't even know what that meant, and promised to invest money she didn't have from accounts that didn't exist to fund a business that would never launch. Spencer was broke, not just tight, broke. The BMW was a lease, $420 a month on an income that averaged $1,800, and that was in a good month. He lived in a shared apartment on Indian School Road with 2 roommates. He had $340 in his checking account, and an expired gym certification he'd been meaning to renew for 4 months. He was, in every meaningful financial sense, a hologram, an image of wealth projected over a void. She told me you guys were getting divorced anyway, Spencer said, and his voice had the hollow quality of a man realizing in real time that the story he'd been told was fiction. She said it was basically over. She said you didn't care. Victor said nothing. The 2 men looked at each other across the table. The folder lay between them, open, the numbers visible, the debt stacked in columns like a bill for a meal neither of them had ordered. So what do you want? Spencer asked again, but the question was different now. The first time he'd asked it, he'd been bracing for a fist or a dollar amount. Now he was genuinely asking. Because the man sitting across from him in the dirty work uniform was not behaving like any jealous husband Spencer had ever encountered. Victor picked up his coffee, drank, set it down. I want to talk, he said, about Kelsey, about what she's been telling you, about what she's been doing with our money. Outside, the parking lot shimmered. The asphalt radiated heat in visible waves, bending the light, making the parked cars look like they were melting. Inside, the coffee got cold. Marcus opened the folder to the next page. Spencer tried to leave. He pushed back his chair, grabbed his sunglasses off the table, and stood with the jerky urgency of a man who just realized the meeting he walked into was not the meeting he'd prepared for. Look, this is between you and her. I'm not. Sit down, Spencer. Victor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He reached into the breast pocket of his work shirt and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a printout from the Swan DVR system, a single frame captured from the footage, grainy and high contrast. The image showed the front porch, a figure in a silk robe, a taller figure leaning in, and in the background at the curb the distinctive profile of a light-colored BMW 3 Series. The image was bad. Low resolution, washed out, infrared artifacts making the faces blurry and ghoulish. But the car was identifiable, and the robe was identifiable. And the fact that Victor had this printout at all meant he had more footage on a hard drive somewhere, footage that Spencer couldn't see and therefore couldn't assess, which meant Spencer's imagination was doing the prosecution's job better than any camera ever could. Spencer sat down. I'm not asking you for money, Victor said. I know you don't have any. I'm not going to hit you. That would feel good for about 10 seconds and then it would cost me in court. I'm not going to send this to your clients or post it anywhere. That's not what I want. Then what? Victor leaned forward. I want you to keep seeing her. Marcus watched from behind his coffee. He'd heard the plan. He didn't love it. But Marcus had been a criminal defense attorney in Maricopa County long enough to know that people in pain rarely chose the clean option. And his job, as Victor's friend and unpaid legal counsel, was not to judge the architecture but to make sure it didn't collapse on the builder. I want you to keep seeing her, Victor repeated. But you report to me. Where you go, what she says. What she spends, everything. You become my source. Spencer stared at him. You want me to spy on your wife? I want you to help me prove that she's been spending our money, our community money. Arizona is very specific about that term on you. On shopping, on trips, on the fantasy she's been building while I'm on a roof in 110-degree heat keeping us from losing the house. That's called marital waste. And if I can prove it, the judge pins the debt on her. Not me, not split 50-50. On her. Spencer processed this slowly, the way a man who has never thought about debt assignment or community property or family court processes anything, with the vague, unfocused alarm of someone being handed a map in a language they don't read. And if I say no? Victor didn't answer. He just looked at the printout on the table, the grainy porch, the robe, the BMW. The silence lasted 8 seconds. Victor counted. Fine, Spencer said. Fine, but I'm not wearing a wire or whatever. I don't need you to wear a wire. I need you to show up when she calls, take her where she wants to go, and let her pay for it. That's all. She's going to run out of money? That's the point. Spencer left the grinder at 9:41 a.m., walking to his BMW with the posture of a man who'd been dismantled and was trying to reassemble himself before reaching his car. Victor watched him through the window. Marcus watched Victor. You know this is ugly, Marcus said. Yes. Using the boyfriend as an intelligence asset. That's not standard divorce strategy. That's ugly, you said. I was going to say risky. If she finds out you're directing him, anything he gives you could be challenged. Coerced testimony, fruit of the poisonous tree. She won't find out. Spencer is more scared of that footage than he is of her. And he's lazy. Lazy people take the path of least resistance. Right now, the path of least resistance is doing what I say. Marcus closed the folder, rubbed his eyes. He looked tired, but it was a different kind of tired than Victor's, the tiredness of a man who spent his days in a strip mall office listening to people explain why they'd blown a 0.14 on a breathalyzer and it wasn't their fault. I'll start the paperwork, Marcus said, quietly. No filing yet. We build the evidence first. I want bank records, credit card statements, anything with her name on it, receipts, photos, dates and times. I have a recorder. What kind? Voice activated, small. I hid it in the living room. Marcus paused. Arizona is a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as you're present in the home where the recording is made, you're probably covered. Probably. I'm a DUI lawyer, Victor. I'm Googling half of this. You're the smartest person I know. That says more about your social circle than my intelligence. Victor almost smiled. Almost. He went home. The house was 89 degrees. Kelsey had been home and gone again. Her coffee mug was in the sink, unwashed, the hazelnut creamer residue forming a ring at the bottom. A half-eaten yogurt sat on the counter, abandoned. Her car keys were gone. Her phone charger was still plugged into the kitchen outlet, which meant she'd left in a hurry or planned to be back soon. Victor walked through the house the way he walked through a building on a diagnostic call, checking systems, noting failures, cataloging damage. The living room, the couch, the fake leather couch that was peeling at the armrests. The television they'd bought on credit. The decorative plant in the ceramic pot, big and leafy and thriving. Kelsey watered it religiously, the only living thing in the house she maintained consistently. Victor knelt beside the pot. He reached into his work bag and pulled out a voice-activated digital recorder, the kind used for lectures and meetings. Small, black, unremarkable. He buried it in the soil, angling the microphone upward, and covered it with a thin layer of potting mix. The plant's broad leaves concealed the device entirely. His hands shook, not from fear, not from adrenaline. From something quieter and worse. The certain crystallized knowledge that the marriage was already over and had been over for a long time, and that everything he was doing now, the cameras, the coffee shop ambush, the recorder in the plant, the unholy alliance with the man who'd been inside his wife, was not an attempt to save anything. It was demolition, controlled demolition. The building was condemned. He was just making sure it came down on the right side. He stood up, wiped the soil from his hands, went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. His face was sunburned across the nose and forehead, peeling along the temples. His eyes had the flat, dry look of a man who hadn't slept deeply in weeks. His hands were rough, the nails short and permanently dark along the cuticle lines from years of handling refrigerant, solder, and sheet metal. The maintenance guy, that's what Spencer had called him. And here he was, maintaining the last functioning system in a collapsing structure, rigging the wiring so the lights stayed on long enough for him to walk out the door. Kelsey came home at 6:15. She was in a mood. Not the chipper performance of the morning. That mask had been discarded somewhere between the dental office and the driveway. Now she was pacing the kitchen in bare feet on the tile, opening and closing the refrigerator, slamming the cabinet doors with the controlled violence of a woman looking for a fight. "Where were you?" she asked. "Work." "You've been coming home later and later. Because there's more work, it's summer. Every unit in the city is running at capacity. You smell weird." "I smell like work, Kelsey. You smell like cheap coffee and secrets." The line was delivered with a precision that told Victor she'd been composing it during the drive home. It was rehearsed, designed to provoke. The gaslighting had a rhythm to it, almost musical. Accusation, pause, escalation, the manufactured grievance of a woman who needed Victor to be the problem so that she could be the victim. So that the affair was justified, so that the spending was justified, so that the whole rotten architecture of her choices had a foundation that wasn't her. "Are you seeing someone?" she asked. The audacity was breathtaking. Victor looked at her, really looked, the way he'd looked at the DVR footage, studying the frame for information, and saw a woman who was not asking because she feared the answer. She was testing, gauging his reaction. If Victor got angry, it confirmed guilt. If Victor got defensive, it confirmed guilt. If Victor stayed calm, it confirmed that he was cold and distant and emotionally unavailable, which also confirmed something, though she'd have to decide what. "No," Victor said, "I'm not seeing anyone." "Then why are you being so weird?" "I'm tired, Kelsey. I was on a roof for 12 hours. "You're always on a roof. You're always tired. You're always somewhere else." He almost said it. Almost said, "And you're always lying, and we're always broke. And there's a man who drives a leased BMW who knows what you look like in the silk robe you told me you lost." The words were right there, stacked behind his teeth like ammunition in a magazine. He swallowed them, went to the spare bedroom, closed the door. Through the wall, he heard her open a bottle of wine. Heard the television turn on. Heard her settle into the couch, into the performance of a normal evening, the kind of evening a woman has when her husband is in the other room and her lover is a text message away, and the world is arranged exactly the way she needs it to be. Victor sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. At 9:47 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from the bill collector. "Third call this week, now escalating to text. This is Pinnacle Recovery Services attempting to reach Kelsey Ruiz regarding an outstanding balance. Please contact us at..." Victor stared at the message. In the past, last month, last week, yesterday, he would have deleted it. Would have called them back and said, "She's unavailable. Can I take a message? I'll let her know." Would have absorbed the call the way he absorbed everything else. The heat, the debt, the lies, the daily erosion of his dignity. Because that's what Victor did. He maintained. He covered. He kept the system running so nobody had to know it was failing. He picked up the phone, called the number. A woman answered, bored, reading from a script. "I'm calling about the message regarding Kelsey Ruiz," Victor said. "Are you Mr. Ruiz?" "I am. Can I speak with Kelsey?" "She's not available, but I can give you her direct number at work." A pause. "That would be helpful, sir." Victor recited the number for the dental office. The direct extension for the front desk, where Kelsey sat all day in her scrubs and her careful makeup, greeting patients and scheduling cleanings, and pretending that everything was fine. He hung up. The calm was back. The cold, unfamiliar calm that had settled over him the night before when he'd sat in front of the DVR and watched his marriage end in grainy black and white. Later. The house was dark. Kelsey was on the couch, her face lit by her phone screen, scrolling. Victor stood in the hallway, invisible in the unlit corridor, watching through the gap between the wall and the doorframe. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Her face changed, The bored, slack expression tightened into something alert and warm, the way a flower opens when light hits it, except the light was a text message from a man who was now working for Victor. She smiled. It was a real smile, unguarded, the kind of smile Victor hadn't seen directed at him in a year, maybe longer. She typed a response quickly, her thumbs moving with the fluency of a woman who'd been having this conversation for a while. She bit her lower lip. She smiled again. The text she was reading had been dictated by Victor. Spencer had sent it from his own phone, word for word, at Victor's direction. A flirtatious message about meeting later in the week. Something casual. Something that kept the hook in without revealing the hand holding the rod. Victor had composed it in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven, typing on the track phone, then reading it aloud to Spencer over a call, then deleting the track phone's history. Now he stood in his own hallway and watched his wife smile at words he had written, meant for her from another man, and felt a sensation he had no name for, a sick, vertiginous mix of power and self-loathing, of control and revulsion, of strategic clarity and personal ruin. He was the puppeteer and the puppet, the architect and the condemned building. The maintenance guy maintaining a system designed to destroy the thing he was maintaining. He went to bed, stared at the ceiling fan. It turned slowly, doing nothing the way it always did. Somewhere outside, the compressor cycled on. The night was hot and long, and the dive bar on Van Buren, didn't have a name anyone used. The sign outside said Rosie's, but the R had burned out years ago and nobody fixed it, so locals just called it the bar on Van Buren, which was imprecise because Van Buren had about 40 bars, but somehow everyone knew which one you meant. Pool table that listed to the left. $2 Budweisers. A jukebox loaded with Creedence and Merle Haggard and nothing recorded after 1983. Victor arrived first. Marcus arrived 12 minutes late carrying a legal pad and a folder thick enough to prop open a door. "You look worse than last time," Marcus said, sliding onto the stool. "You say that every time. Because it's true every time." Marcus ordered 2 beers, slid one across the scarred bar top. "All right, let's talk about your house." "It's not my house." "It's the bank's house that I'm paying to live in." "Correct, and that's actually the first piece of good news you've had in a while." Marcus uncapped a pen with his teeth. "Your house is worth maybe 110, you owe 205. In 2010 Phoenix, that house is not an asset, Victor, it's an anchor. Half the mortgages in this zip code are underwater. Judges see this every day. The house is going to foreclosure whether you file or not. The question is who gets buried under Kelsey's debt when the dust settles." "So how do we make sure it's not me?" Marcus tapped the folder. "Marital waste. We prove she took community money, that's money earned during the marriage, both of yours, and spent it on the affair, on Spencer, on luxury garbage. On anything that wasn't keeping your household afloat. If we prove that convincingly, the judge can assign a disproportionate share of the debt to her." "How disproportionate?" "Depends on the judge, depends on the evidence. Could be 60-40, could be 70-30, could be better if she really went off the rails." Marcus paused, took a long drink. "But I need to warn you about something. You mentioned quitting your job to lower your income before we file." "Marcus, listen, Arizona judges can impute income. That means if you quit voluntarily, the court says, 'Nice try, buddy, you can earn 50 grand a year, so we're calculating your obligations based on 50 grand whether you're making it or not.' You have to look like you lost the work, not like you walked away." Victor stared at his beer. The condensation ran down the glass and pooled on the bar in a ring that reminded him of Kelsey's coffee mug on the counter, always left for him to wash. "The economy is doing that job for me," Victor said. "Construction is dead. New installs are dead. Half my calls are service work for buildings that can't afford to replace what I'm fixing. If my hours get cut, nobody in this city is going to question it." Marcus wrote something on the legal pad. "Good, that's the angle. Now I need receipts, bank statements, credit card records, anything that shows what she's been spending and where. Can you get into her accounts? She has a laptop. She never logs out of anything." "That's not exactly," Marcus stopped, rubbed his forehead. "I'm a DUI lawyer, Victor. I'm Googling half of this. But if the information is accessible on a shared household computer, it's probably not a Fourth Amendment issue in a civil case. Probably. Get me the records, print them, don't tell me how." "Understood." Marcus closed the folder. looked at Victor with the expression of a man who was about to say something he didn't want to say. One more thing, this Spencer arrangement, him reporting to you, you directing the affair, it's effective. I get it. But if it comes out in court that you orchestrated continued infidelity for strategic purposes, it muddies everything. You go from wronged husband to puppet master. Judges don't like puppet masters. Then it doesn't come out. Victor, it doesn't come out, Marcus. They finished their beers in silence. The jukebox played Bad Moon Rising. It felt a little on the nose. Saturday morning. Kelsey left at 10 for what she called brunch with Dana from work. Victor knew she was meeting Spencer at a restaurant in Tempe because Spencer had texted him the location an hour earlier, dutifully, like a man filing a report with his parole officer. Victor went to the attic. The pull-down ladder creaked. The heat up there was staggering, easily 130 degrees in the unventilated crawl space, the insulation giving off a chemical smell that burned the back of his throat. Pink fiberglass bats hung between the joists like cotton candy in hell. Victor pulled himself up with a flashlight between his teeth and started moving boxes. Holiday decorations, a plastic Christmas tree they'd used twice, a box of Kelsey's old textbooks from the dental assistant program, and behind all of it, tucked against the far wall where the roofline met the floor, a black garbage bag, not dusty, recent. He opened it. 4 handbags, 2 pairs of shoes, a watch still in its box. He recognized the bags, not the brands, because Victor couldn't tell a Coach from a Chanel, but the bags from Scottsdale Fashion Square, the upscale shopping center where Kelsey sometimes browsed on weekends. Tags still attached to 2 of them. Prices visible, $1,200, $890, $1,450. The watch was $2,100, $8 to $12,000. Hidden in a garbage bag in the attic of a house 3 months behind on the mortgage. Victor photographed everything with a disposable camera he'd bought at Walgreens, not his phone. Marcus had warned him, phones get subpoenaed, metadata gets examined, timestamps get questioned. A disposable camera was analog, simple, undeniable. 27 exposures, he used 9. He put everything back exactly as he found it, climbed down, showered the fiberglass off his arms. The fries in Apache Junction smelled like floor wax and refrigerated produce. Victor was in the bread aisle, tossing a loaf of store-brand wheat and 2 cans of soup into a basket when he heard her voice. "Victor, is that you?" Catherine rounded the end cap, pushing a cart with 3 items, a carton of Pall Malls, a 2-liter of Diet Coke, and a magazine with a celebrity couple on the cover under the headline Dream Wedding. "Hi, Catherine." She looked at his hands. She always looked at his hands. The cracked knuckles, the permanently dark nail beds, the fresh bandage on his left thumb where a sheet metal edge had caught him yesterday. "Working hard, I see," she said, and the way she said it made working hard sound like a character flaw. "Somebody has to. You know, my Kelsey could have married anyone. She had options. Chad from her graduating class became a dentist." An actual dentist, not a receptionist. He asked her out twice. Victor placed the soup cans in his basket carefully. "She married me, Catherine." "She did, and here you are buying canned soup." Catherine's eyes swept his work boots, his faded jeans, the company shirt with someone else's name stitched on it because Victor had inherited it from a tech who quit. "She deserves a man who doesn't come home smelling like a furnace." Victor looked at Catherine's cart, the cigarettes, the diet soda, the magazine Fantasy. He almost said it. Almost said, "Your daughter stole $5,000 from your retirement fund, Catherine. Maybe save the career advice for someone whose life savings aren't being looted by their own child." "Have a good day, Catherine," he said. He drove home on the 60. The highway corridor was a museum of the housing collapse. 3 developments he passed had street signs, Saguaro Vista Lane, Copper Ridge Drive, Desert Bloom Circle, standing over empty lots where nothing had been built and nothing would be. The graded dirt was already returning to desert. Tumbleweeds had collected against the curbs. "We buy ugly houses" signs lined the roadside in yellow clusters, like weeds growing from the carcass of the American dream. The screenshot arrived at 12:47 p.m. the next day. Victor was in his van, parked behind a strip mall on Thunderbird, eating a cold ham sandwich he'd assembled that morning from gas station bread and deli meat. His phone buzzed. Spencer's number. An image file. He opened it. A text conversation. Kelsey's name at the top, Her messages in green, I am so tired of pretending. Victor is a loser who can't satisfy me in any way, emotionally, physically, financially. He's a man with no ambition who peaked at a thermostat. I swear to God, if I have to watch him eat one more sandwich in that van, I will lose my mind. Victor read it twice. He set the phone face down on the passenger seat. He looked at the sandwich in his hand. Ham on white, gas station mustard. He looked at the van's dashboard clock, 12:49 p.m. He cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, pressurized leak from somewhere behind his sternum, tears running down the sunburned creases of his face into the corners of his mouth. Salt on salt. At 12:50 he stopped. Wiped his face with the shop rag from the center console, wrapped the sandwich back up, started the van. He had a 2:30 call in Glendale, a rooftop unit with a bad contactor. The work didn't care about his feelings. The work was the only thing that had never lied to him. That Thursday, Victor pinched the valve on the hot water heater, a quarter turn. Enough to cut flow to a trickle without leaving any visible sign of tampering. The kind of adjustment that would baffle a homeowner and take a licensed technician about 10 seconds to diagnose. But Kelsey would never call a technician, because Kelsey assumed Victor would fix everything, because that was his function in the architecture of her life. He was in the garage when he heard the shower turn on, heard it run for 30 seconds, then a shriek. Kelsey came down the stairs like a thunderstorm. The water is freezing, Victor, it's ice cold. I'll look at it. You'll look at it. You're an HVAC guy. Isn't this literally your job? Hot water heaters are plumbing, Kels. I do refriger. I don't care what you do, fix it. God, what is the point of being married to a repairman if nothing in this house works? Victor said nothing. He let the silence stretch. It was a technique he'd learned from Marcus, though Marcus used it in depositions. Say nothing, and the other person will fill the void with things they'll regret. Kelsey filled the void. This is what my mother warned me about, you know that. She said, Kelsey, you're marrying down. I should have listened. I married a man who can't even keep the hot water running. I married down. I married beneath me. The words landed like small, precise incisions, each one cutting along a line that had already been scored by months of smaller cuts. The cold shoulders, the empty bed, the thermostat set to make him suffer. Are you going to say anything? Kelsey demanded. I'll look at it tomorrow, Victor said. I've got an early call. She stormed upstairs. A door slammed, then another. The ceramic pot sat in the living room, its broad leaves motionless. The recorder inside had captured every word. That night in the van, Victor played it back through earbuds. Kelsey's voice filled his skull. I married down. I married beneath me. He wrote the date and time in a pocket notebook. Then he ejected the earbuds, started the engine, and drove to his next morning's job site to prep materials. Travis was already there, sitting on the tailgate of his truck, eating a breakfast burrito in the dark. Boss, it's 4 a.m. Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd get the unit staged. Travis looked at him. The kid was 22 and had the emotional perception of a golden retriever, limited in range but startlingly accurate within it. You okay, Vic? I'm fine. Because you look like you've been crying. It's the fiberglass from the attic gets in your eyes. Travis nodded. He didn't believe it, but he was young enough to know when not to push. They staged the condensers in silence, side by side, while the sky turned from black to purple to the first pale orange warning of another 100-degree day. The nail polish was called Scarlet Ambition. Kelsey painted her left hand with steady, practiced strokes while she delivered the lie. There's a dental conference in Vegas this weekend. The office is sending me and Dana. It's continuing education, we need the credits. Victor sat across the kitchen table, eating leftover rice from a Tupperware container. Vegas in August. It's at the Bellagio, it's air-conditioned, Victor, it's not like I'm going to be standing outside. The Bellagio, fancy for a dental conference. It's where the conference is, I didn't pick the venue. She blew on her nails. Switched hands. I'll need some money for gas and food. Dana's driving, but I should contribute. Victor had received the confirmation text from Spencer 40 minutes ago. She asked me to take her to Vegas this weekend. Bellagio, what do you want me to do? Victor had replied from the track phone, take her. But your cards are frozen. Fraud alert on your account. She pays for everything. Every meal, every drink, every hotel charge. You're broke and helpless. Let her spend. Now he watched Kelsey paint her nails and talk about a conference that didn't exist, and he reached for his wallet. I've got 500, he said. He pulled the bills out slowly, 500s withdrawn that morning from the ATM, the transaction recorded on the separate ledger Marcus was maintaining. For gas and food, I wish I could come with you. Kelsey looked up. For a half-second, something moved behind her eyes, not guilt, Victor decided, but the discomfort of receiving genuine-sounding kindness from someone you're actively betraying. It passed quickly, overwritten by the more familiar calculus of money received and opportunity seized. "You're sweet," she said. She took the bills, folded them into her purse. "I'll bring you back something from the gift shop." She wouldn't, they both knew it, but the performance required the line, so she delivered it. Friday morning. Kelsey packed a bag that was too large for a 2-day conference and too carefully curated for a trip with a coworker named Dana. Victor watched from the hallway as she folded a black dress he'd never seen before, purchased, he assumed, with money they didn't have, for a man who wasn't her husband. "Have fun," he said from the doorway. "It's work, Victor, it's not fun." "Right, well, learn something." She kissed his cheek on the way out. Her lips were cool and brief. The front door closed. Through the living room window, Victor watched Spencer's BMW pull up at the end of the block. Kelsey walked to it quickly, head down, like a woman who understood that what she was doing required speed and low visibility. She got in. The car pulled away. Victor stood at the window until the BMW turned the corner and disappeared. Then he called Marcus. "She's gone. You free this weekend?" "I was going to reorganize my filing cabinet. I need help moving things." "What things?" "Everything that matters." Marcus arrived at noon with a six-pack and a roll of packing tape. They started in the spare bedroom. Victor's father's tools, a set of Craftsman wrenches from the 1970s, the chrome pitted but the fit still true. A framed photo of Victor's high school baseball team the year they made it to the state quarterfinals. A shoebox of letters from his grandmother in Lafayette, Indiana, written in a looping cursive on yellow legal paper, each one signed "Love and Prayers, Nana Ruiz." "This stuff going to storage?" Marcus asked, wrapping the frame in newspaper. "Unit off the I-17, month to month, $40. And you're replacing it all with thrift store equivalents. Different frame, same size, different tools, same drawer. She won't notice. She's never once looked at anything in this room and seen what it actually was." Marcus set down the frame. "That's the saddest thing you've ever said to me, and you've said some sad things." "Just tape the box, Marcus." They worked through the afternoon. Grand Avenue had 3 thrift stores within a mile of each other. Goodwill, a St. Vincent de Paul, and a place called Second Chance that sold estate liquidation furniture for cash. Victor bought replacement frames, a set of mismatched wrenches, a generic toolbox. The substitutions were close enough to pass a glance, but would mean nothing to anyone who looked closely. The house was becoming a stage set, the shape of a home with the heart removed. By Saturday evening, the storage unit held 6 boxes and the living room couch was gone, replaced by one Marcus found on Craigslist for $30 that was the same approximate color but sagged in the middle like a defeated animal. "She's going to notice the couch," Marcus said. "No. She's going to notice it's not as comfortable. She'll blame me for not buying a better one. She'll never realize it's a different couch." Marcus sat on the replacement, tested the sag. "You know your wife pretty well. I know what she sees and what she doesn't. That's not the same as knowing someone." Saturday night, 9:14 p.m., Victor's phone rang. Kelsey. He let it ring 3 times, picked up. "Hey, Kels, how's the conference?" Her voice was tight, strained. The sound of casino noise behind her, slot machines, ambient music, the particular acoustic signature of a building designed to make you lose track of time. "It's fine. Listen, something happened with Spencer's with Dana's card. She can't pay for anything. There was a fraud alert or something. I had to put the hotel on my emergency visa." Victor leaned against the kitchen counter. Marcus was sitting on the floor where the original couch had been, drinking a beer, listening. "That's weird," Victor said. "A fraud alert." "I know, and dinner was $200. I didn't even order anything expensive. Vegas is just everything is expensive here." "I'm sorry, babe, that's stressful." "Can you transfer anything from checking? Even 200 would help." "Kels, I gave you everything I had. The 500 was it. I've got a service call Monday, but until then I'm tapped." Silence on the line. The slot machines filled the gap. "Okay," Kelsey said. Her voice had a hairline fracture in it, not sadness, Victor recognized, but the particular stress of a woman watching a fantasy collapse in real time, the gilded architecture of the weekend buckling under the weight of a maxed visa and a man whose cards were conveniently frozen. Okay, I'll figure it out. I'm sure Dana will sort out her card thing. Yeah, right, Dana. A pause. I'll be home tomorrow. Drive safe? He hung up. Marcus, from the floor, raised his beer in a slow, silent toast. The apartment was quiet. Through the window, the Maryvale streetlights cast their amber cones on the empty sidewalk, and somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Victor didn't drink. He sat on the $30 couch and stared at the wall where his grandmother's letters used to be, and felt the specific loneliness of a man who is winning a war he never wanted to fight. Kelsey came home Sunday afternoon looking like a woman who'd been through a windshield. Not physically. There were no injuries, no visible damage beyond a sunburn across her shoulders where she'd apparently spent time at a pool she couldn't afford. But something behind her face had shifted. The confident architecture of the fantasy had developed cracks, and Kelsey wasn't skilled enough at structural repair to hide them. She dropped her bag by the door, didn't kiss Victor hello. Walked straight to the refrigerator, opened it, stared inside for 15 seconds without taking anything, and closed it. How was the conference? Victor asked from the kitchen table. Fine. Learn anything good? Victor, please. She went upstairs. The shower ran for 30 minutes. The hot water was working again. Victor had fixed the valve that morning, a small mercy he extended not out of affection, but because the sabotage had served its purpose and the recorder had what it needed. For 2 days, Kelsey barely spoke. She moved through the house like a woman underwater, slow and muffled. No chipper mornings, no theatrical yawns. No small talk about patients or coworkers or veneers. The performance had stalled, replaced by something rower and more honest. The sullen quiet of a person who has realized that the exit door they were counting on opens onto another room with no windows. Spencer texted Victor on Tuesday, "She's not returning my calls. I think she's pissed about the money thing." Victor replied, "Good. Let her cool off. She'll come back. She always comes back to the plan, Wednesday afternoon." Victor was on a commercial roof in Tempe, replacing a contactor on a 5-ton carrier unit when his phone rang. The caller ID said LESLIE work. Leslie Duran ran the service division of the HVAC company with the calm precision of a woman who had spent 15 years in a male-dominated trade and had long since stopped caring whether anyone found that remarkable. She was 41 direct and had the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "Victor, I've got a project. I'm on the Tempe call right now. This is bigger. New restaurant build on Mill Avenue. Full HVAC install. Commercial kitchen hoods, split systems, the works. It's a 6-week job, probably 8 with inspections. I need a lead tech." Victor closed his eyes. The roof radiated heat through his boots. The money would be significant, overtime, per diem, the kind of paycheck that could fill the holes in his savings. "When does it start?" "Next Monday. I need an answer by Friday." "Leslie, He stopped, started again. "I've got some personal things going on. I can't commit to a 6-week project right now." A pause. Leslie was not a woman who filled pauses with noise. She let them sit, which made them heavy. "Is this something you want to talk about?" "No." "Okay." Another pause. "The job will be here when you're ready, Victor. You're the best tech I've got, and I don't say that to keep you compliant. I say it because it's true and you should know it." "Thank you, Leslie. Take care of your personal things. Call me when you're through the other side." She hung up. No small talk, no pressure, just clarity and an open door. Victor stared at his phone and felt, for the first time in weeks, something that wasn't anger or strategy or self-loathing. He filed the feeling away without naming it. That evening, he called Marcus. "I turned down the Tempe project." "Good. File for reduced hours this week. I'll draft the paperwork. With the construction downturn, every HVAC company in the valley is cutting shifts. Nobody's going to look twice. What about the inheritance thing? Is it ready?" "I typed it up on letterhead I bought at Office Depot. Looks real enough to fool someone who's never seen a probate letter, which describes Kelsey perfectly. You sure about this?" "I'm sure." "It's manipulative, Victor. Everything about the last 6 months has been manipulative. At least this time I'm the one holding the pen." Victor planted the letter on a Thursday night while Kelsey was in the shower. The letterhead read, "Whitfield and Associates, attorneys at law, Lafayette, Indiana." A fictional firm at a real address. Victor had looked up a vacant office building on Google Maps. The letter was addressed to Victor, informing him that a great uncle named Harold Ruiz had passed away and that Victor was named as a partial beneficiary of the estate pending probate review. The language was deliberately vague. Assets in excess of a significant sum and distribution contingent upon completion of probate proceedings. No dollar figure. No timeline. Just enough smoke to make Kelsey believe there was fire. He slid the letter into his nightstand drawer, leaving the corner visible. Kelsey snooped through his nightstand regularly. He'd confirmed this weeks ago by placing a hair across the drawer gap and checking it each evening. The hair was always displaced. She was always looking. 46 hours later, Kelsey made carne asada. Victor came home from a half-day call, a residential unit in Ahwatukee, easy work, one of the cash jobs he'd started taking to stay busy without reporting income, and the house smelled like grilled meat, charred peppers, and fresh tortillas. Candles on the table. The real plates, not the everyday ones. A bottle of wine she'd opened and let breathe. Kelsey stood at the stove with her hair down, wearing the kind of smile Victor hadn't seen in over a year. The transformation was instant and complete, like a set change between acts. "I made your favorite," she said. "I can see that. Sit down, I want to talk about something." Victor sat. Kelsey brought the food, poured the wine. Sat across from him with her hands folded, her posture open, her entire body oriented toward him like a satellite dish receiving a signal it had been waiting for. "I've been thinking," she said. "About us, about our future. I know things have been hard. I know I haven't been the wife you deserve." Victor chewed. The carne asada was perfect. She'd always been a good cook when she wanted to be, which was the cruelest part. The talent was there, the capacity for warmth was there. It was just allocated strategically, distributed based on what she expected to receive in return. "What brought this on?" he asked. I've been thinking about family, your family. You never talk about Indiana, your relatives. I feel like I don't even know that side of you." There it was, the bridge to the money. She was building it plank by plank, each question a piece of lumber laid across the gap between her and the fictional inheritance. "My family is complicated," Victor said. "All families are complicated. Tell me about your uncle, Harold. I think you mentioned him once." She hadn't even tried to disguise the snoop. Or maybe she had, and this was her version of subtlety, a clumsy, transparent redirect that she believed was seamless because she'd never had to be good at deception with Victor. She'd only had to be adequate, and he'd always accepted adequate because he'd mistaken it for genuine. "Uncle Harold passed," Victor said, "a few weeks ago. There's some estate stuff. I don't really know the details." "Estate stuff?" Kelsey's eyes brightened. She controlled it quickly, but not quickly enough. "Like an inheritance? Maybe. The lawyer's letter said it's in probate. Could be nothing, could take years. But it could be something. Sure, it could be something." Kelsey reached across the table and touched his arm. Her fingers were warm from the stove. The touch kept separate. The woman in the kitchen humming while she washed dishes was the same woman who called him a loser who peeked at a thermostat. And the warmth she was offering him tonight was priced exactly to the dollar amount she believed was waiting in an Indiana probate court. He sat on the bathroom floor. The tile was cool. Through the door, he could hear her humming. She hadn't hummed in months. He washed his face, looked in the mirror. The man looking back had sunburned skin and hollow eyes and the expression of someone who had just confirmed a diagnosis he'd been dreading. She never loved him. She loved what he could provide. He was infrastructure, plumbing and wiring and load-bearing walls, not a person, a system. He dried his face, went back to the table, smiled. "That was the best meal you've made in years, Kels." She beamed. The candles flickered between them, throwing shadows on the walls of a house that was already gone. The vow renewal was Kelsey's idea, which made it Victor's best weapon. She brought it up on a Sunday morning, 3 days after the carne asada dinner, sitting in bed with her laptop open to a website called RenewYourLove.com that sold ceremony packages starting at $299. "What if we renewed our vows?" she said, turning the screen toward him. "A recommitment, a fresh start. We've been through so much, the house, the stress, all of it. I think we need a moment to say, we choose this, we choose each other." Victor was lacing his boots for a morning call. He looked at the screen, stock photos of couples on beaches, script font. A man dipping a woman in white while a sunset cooperated on cue. "I think that's beautiful," he said. "Really?" She sat up straighter. The eagerness was so raw it almost made him feel something. Almost. "You don't think it's cheesy?" "No, I think we need it. Let's do a dinner, small, your mom, maybe a couple friends. I'll handle the guest list." "You want to plan it." "I want to take this seriously, Kells. You deserve that." The word deserve was a key that turned a lock Victor could hear clicking from across the room. Kelsey's entire body softened. She set the laptop aside and hugged him, the first genuine feeling embrace in months, though Victor understood now that the feeling was an illusion generated by the word inheritance humming somewhere beneath every gesture she made. "I'll plan the menu," she said into his shoulder. "I've got the guest list." The guest list was short. Catherine, obviously, Kelsey insisted. Marcus, who Victor described to Kelsey as my buddy who does some financial consulting on the side. "Financial consulting?" Kelsey perked up. "Is this about the estate thing? I was thinking he could help us plan. If the inheritance comes through, we should be smart about it." "Victor, yes, that's so responsible." And then the surprise guest. "I also invited someone," Victor said. "A financial advisor, a real professional, somebody who can walk us through estate planning, investment options, that kind of thing." "Who?" "A guy I met through work. His name is Spencer. You'll like him." If the name registered, Kelsey's face didn't show it. Spencer was common enough. And in Kelsey's mind, Victor existed in a world of HVAC calls and rooftop labor, a world that couldn't possibly overlap with the other compartment of her life, the one containing Spencer and the BMW and the silk robe. The two worlds were separated in her mental architecture by a wall she believed was solid. The wall was not solid. Victor had been dismantling it for months. "Sounds great," she said. "I'll make carne asada." The evening arrived, late September. The Phoenix heat hadn't fully surrendered, 94 degrees at 6 p.m., the kind of warmth that made you sweat just standing still. Inside, it was worse. Victor had closed the refrigerant valve on the AC unit that afternoon. A simple adjustment, a quarter turn on the service valve, restricting flow to the evaporator coil. The system would run, the fan would blow, but the air coming out of the vents would be room temperature. Useless. A homeowner would feel the warm air and assume the unit had died. A technician would find the valve and fix it in 10 seconds. Kelsey was not a technician. By 6:30, the house was 90 degrees and climbing. Catherine arrived first, carrying a store-bought pie and a frown. She sat at the dining table, fanning herself with a paper plate. "Why is it so hot in here, Kelsey?" "The AC broke. Victor's going to look at it after dinner." "Broke? Doesn't he fix these things for a living?" "Apparently not this one." Victor, setting out plates, said nothing. Kelsey's makeup was beginning to soften along her jawline, foundation mixing with perspiration. The candles she'd lit for ambience were now adding heat. The windows were open, but the outside air was the same temperature as the inside air, and the cross breeze was carrying nothing but the smell of heated stucco and a neighbor's grill. Everyone was uncomfortable. Everyone was irritable. The heat was doing what Victor needed it to do, stripping the evening of its staged romance, exposing the raw edges underneath. Kelsey served the food. Carne asada, again her signature, her best performance piece. Victor ate slowly. Catherine picked at hers and complained about the heat. The empty chairs waited. At 7:15, Victor excused himself. "I'm going to check on dessert," he said. He walked to the front door, opened it. Marcus stood on the porch in a collared shirt and pressed slacks, the most formal Victor had ever seen him, and the effort was almost touching, like a man who understood that the moment required a costume even if the play was a tragedy. He carried a manila envelope, thick, unsealed. Victor stepped aside. Marcus walked into the dining room. Kelsey looked up. Catherine looked up. The ceiling fan turned slowly, moving air that was too warm to provide relief. "Kelsey Ruiz," Marcus said. "Yes," he extended the envelope. "You've been served." Kelsey took it, opened it. Her eyes moved across the first page, the header of the Maricopa County Family Court, the case number, the words "petition for dissolution of marriage," and the color left her face in a single visible wave, starting at her forehead and draining downward like water through sand. "Victor," she whispered. "Read it," he said. Catherine reached for the document. Kelsey pulled it away. The room was silent except for the useless fan and the ticking of the house expanding in the heat. Then the front door opened again. Spencer walked in. He'd been waiting in his BMW down the block for 20 minutes, engine running, AC blasting, unclear on his exact role in what Victor had described only as the last step. He was wearing a fitted shirt and the expression of a man who had agreed to participate in something he didn't fully understand because the alternative, the DVR footage, the exposure, the collapse of his already collapsing life, was worse. Kelsey saw him. Her mouth opened. Her eyes went to Spencer, then to Victor, then to Marcus, then back to Spencer. The three men formed a triangle around the dining table, and she was at its center, and the geometry of the last several months, the affair, the reports, the alliance, the fake inheritance, the dictated texts, assembled itself in her mind like a puzzle completing from the edges inward. Spencer knew Victor. Victor knew Spencer. The financial advisor was the lover. The lover was the informant. The inheritance was bait. The dinner was a trap. The vow renewal was a delivery mechanism for divorce papers. Everything she had believed was compartmentalized. The husband in one box, the affair in another, the money in a third, had been a single box the entire time, and Victor had been standing outside it, watching her through walls she thought were solid. "You," she started, looking at Spencer. Spencer said nothing. He looked at the floor. "You knew," she said to him. The room held its breath. A fly had found the carne asada and was circling it in lazy, indifferent loops. The house settled in the heat, a faint tick from the roof joists, the sound of a structure adjusting to temperature, which was also the sound of everything shifting by degrees too small to see until the whole thing was somewhere new. Nobody spoke. Victor sat down, picked up his fork, took a bite of carne asada. It was, he noted distantly, perfectly seasoned. The silence lasted 6 seconds. Victor counted them the way he'd counted Kelsey's lies, automatically, without deciding to, because his brain had become a recording device and silence was just another form of data. Then Kelsey's chair hit the floor. She stood so fast the chair tipped backward and cracked against the tile. Her hands were shaking. Her face was flushed from the heat and from something deeper, something structural giving way, and when she opened her mouth, the sound that came out was not the voice of the woman who hummed while doing dishes or cooed about our future over candlelit carne asada. It was raw, it was loud, and it was aimed at every person in the room like buckshot. "You're sick," she said to Victor. "You are a sick, abusive, controlling monster. You've been torturing me, psychologically torturing me for months, spying on me, manipulating me, setting traps like I'm some kind of animal." She turned to Catherine. "Mom, this whole dinner was a setup. He's been stalking me, recording me. He's dangerous." Catherine's hand was frozen over her paper plate fan. Her eyes moved between her daughter and Victor. The maternal reflex was activating, the deep biological pull to defend her child regardless of evidence, regardless of logic, regardless of the divorce papers still sitting on the table next to the cooling food. "Victor," Catherine started, "what is going on?" "Let me show you," Victor said. He reached into his back pocket. Pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, the cheap kind sold at drugstores for $15. He set it on the table next to the carne asada. Connected his phone. Pressed play. Kelsey's voice filled the room, clear, unmistakable, recorded in the living room they were standing in, captured by the device buried in the ceramic pot 6 feet from where Kelsey now stood. The audio was Kelsey talking to Spencer on the phone, a conversation from 3 weeks ago, captured while Victor was at work and Kelsey thought she was alone. "The second that inheritance money clears, I'm filing. I already talked to a lawyer. Victor is too stupid to see it coming. He's a stepping stone, Spencer. He was always a stepping stone. I just need the money to land and then I'm gone." The recording played for 90 seconds. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Catherine's hand drifted from the paper plate to her mouth. Victor pressed stop. The room was 90 degrees. The fly had landed on the tortillas. "That's taken out of context," Kelsey said. Her voice had changed. The rage was still there, but it was scrambling now, looking for purchase, trying to find a surface that would hold. "You recorded me without my consent. That's illegal. Arizona is a one-party consent state," Victor said. "I live here. I consented." Mom, listen to me." "I'm listening," Catherine said, but her voice was different now, flatter. The maternal reflex was faltering, weakened by what she'd heard, and Victor was about to kill it entirely. He slid the printout across the table. "What's this?" Catherine asked. Bank records, Kelsey's been withdrawing money from your retirement savings account. $5,000 over 6 months, small amounts. 200 here, 300 there. Designed to stay under the threshold where you'd notice. Catherine looked at the printout. The numbers were highlighted in yellow. Dates, amounts, account ending in 4471. Her account, her savings, her 30 years of tip money and Social Security and careful, penny-counted survival stored in a credit union in Apache Junction. Kelsey, Catherine said, that's not he faked those. He's manipulating. Kelsey, is this real? Mom, did you steal from me? The question hung in the air like smoke. Kelsey's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked at her mother, and for the first time all evening, Victor saw something on her face that wasn't calculation or strategy. It was fear, real fear. Because Catherine wasn't Victor. Catherine couldn't be managed with tears or charm or candlelit dinners. Catherine was a woman who had counted every dollar of her life, who had worked double shifts at Denny's for 22 years, and saved with the grim discipline of someone who knew exactly how close the edge was. And her daughter had reached into that savings and stolen from it. Catherine set down the printout. She turned to her daughter, and she said nothing, which was worse, which was so much worse than anything she could have said. Spencer stood up. He'd been standing near the door since he walked in, frozen in the posture of a man who had agreed to attend a controlled demolition and realized too late that he was inside the building. The scratch on the table, the audio recording, the stolen retirement money, this had gone so far past what he'd signed up for that his only functioning instinct was escape. I'm leaving, he said. Kelsey turned. Something broke. Not slowly, not with the gradual structural failure Victor had experienced over months. It broke all at once, like a window hit by a rock, and what came through the opening wasn't grief or shame. It was rage. Pure, undiluted animal rage aimed at the man who was supposed to be her exit. You told him, she said, moving toward Spencer. You were supposed to be, you were my way out, and you told him everything. Kelsey, don't, she lunged. Her nails caught Spencer below his left eye, a 3-inch scratch that opened immediately, blood welling in a thin red line across his cheekbone. Spencer stumbled backward into the wall. Kelsey grabbed his shirt. He shoved her hard, reflexive, both hands on her shoulders, and she hit the edge of the dining table, rattling the plates. Don't touch me, she screamed. Don't you dare. You scratched my face. You're insane. The screaming went through the open windows and into the night. The neighbor 2 houses down, an older man named Reyes, who Victor had helped fix a swamp cooler last summer, picked up his phone and called 911. Later, he would tell Victor he was sorry. Victor would tell him not to be. The patrol car arrived in 7 minutes. 2 Maricopa County officers. A man and a woman, both young, both practiced. Domestic calls in this zip code had tripled since the foreclosure wave started. They knew the choreography: separate the parties, check for injuries, take statements, determine the primary aggressor. The scratch on Spencer's face made it simple: visible injury. Witness statements consistent. Victor, Marcus, and Catherine all confirmed Kelsey initiated the physical contact. Spencer's shove was reactive. Under Arizona's mandatory arrest policies for domestic violence with visible evidence, Kelsey was detained. Handcuffed in the driveway, read her rights, placed in the back of the patrol car. Victor sat on the front porch. The concrete was still warm from the day. He held a beer from the last 6-pack in the fridge, the cheap kind, the kind Kelsey wouldn't drink because it wasn't good enough, and watched the patrol car's lights paint the stucco walls in alternating red and blue. The colors pulsed across the foreclosure notice on the door, across the fallen gnome in the gravel, across the face of the house he'd bought in 2006 because he believed in things like equity and commitment and the idea that if you did everything right, the structure would hold. He felt no joy. No satisfaction, no triumph, just exhaustion, deep, bone-level, mechanical, like an engine that had been running past its service interval and was now idling rough, waiting to be shut down. Marcus walked out the front door, loosened his collar. You okay? No. Yeah, Marcus sat beside him on the porch. That was ugly. It was necessary. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They sat in silence. The patrol car pulled away. The street went dark again. Somewhere down the block, a dog started barking, the same dog Victor thought that barked every night at nothing, at everything, at the particular frequency of a neighborhood coming apart. I'm leaving tonight, Victor said. Where will you go? I saw a studio on 19th Avenue, month to month, $450 a month. That's half your take home. That's all my take home, but it's mine. Victor finished the beer, set the bottle on the porch, stood up. He went inside and packed one duffel bag. His clothes, his work boots, his phone charger, everything that mattered was already in the storage unit off the I-17. The house was a shell now, fake tools in the drawers, a $30 couch in the living room, and a woman's absence where a marriage used to be. He walked out the front door, down the walkway, past the garden gnome still lying on its side in the gravel where Spencer had kicked it weeks ago. Victor looked at it. He didn't pick it up. He got in his truck, started the engine, pulled out of the cul-de-sac and onto Merivale Drive, then east on the 202. The windows were down. The night air was warm, late September, the heat letting go reluctantly like a hand releasing a grip one finger at a time. The city lights smeared across his windshield. The house shrank in his mirrors. No AC, no electricity, no husband. Just a foreclosure notice, a ceramic pot with a recorder in the soil, and the buzzing of a fly that had found the carne asada and decided to stay. 3 months later, the weather in Phoenix finally made sense. 65 degrees, clear sky. The kind of winter day that reminded you why people moved here in the first place. Before the summers broke them, before the mortgages broke them, before the whole sun-bleached promise of the Sunbelt revealed itself as a contract with terms nobody read. December in Phoenix was beautiful. It was the city's apology for June through September. Victor sat in a courtroom hallway in the Maricopa County Superior Court building on West Jefferson, waiting for his case to be called. The hallway smelled like floor polish and anxiety. Families sat on wooden benches, separated by invisible fault lines, husbands on one side, wives on the other, lawyers in between, everyone staring at their phones or their shoes. Marcus sat beside him, reviewing a folder. Her attorney is going to argue abandonment, Marcus said quietly. You left the house. She stayed. On paper, that's abandonment. I left because she was arrested for domestic violence. I know that, the judge knows that, but her guy is going to try it anyway because it's all he's got. Don't react, don't speak unless spoken to, let me handle it. What about the alimony claim? Marcus closed the folder. Dead on arrival, we've got documented marital waste, the handbags, the Vegas trip, the credit card debt. We've got the audio recordings of her planning to divorce you for the inheritance money. And we've got the DV citation. Her credibility is gone, Victor, she's arguing from a hole. And the house? The house is gone regardless. Foreclosure auction is set for January. Bank's already written it off. Neither of you is getting a cent from that property. The real fight is the debt, who carries the 40 grand in credit cards, who carries the mortgage deficiency. That's what today is about. Victor nodded. Across the hallway, he could see Kelsey sitting with a court-appointed attorney, a young man in an ill-fitting suit who kept checking his watch. Kelsey looked different, thinner, paler. The Scottsdale polish was gone, replaced by the raw, scrubbed look of a woman who couldn't afford the products that had maintained the illusion. She didn't look at Victor. She stared at the floor. For a moment, just a moment, Victor felt something shift in his chest. Not sympathy, not forgiveness. Something older and more complicated, like the memory of a time when they'd been kind to each other, when she'd laughed at his jokes and he'd believed it was real. The feeling passed. He let it go, January. The house went to auction on the courthouse steps. Victor didn't attend. Marcus told him the result over the phone. Sold, $85,000. Flipper out of Scottsdale bought it cash. We paid $220. I know. The bank eats the difference. The bank eats most of it. You'll get a deficiency letter, but with your current income profile, they're not going to chase you. It's not worth their legal fees. They'll write it off and move on. Victor was sitting in his studio apartment on 19th Avenue when he got the call, 450 square feet. A mattress on the floor, a card table and one chair. A window unit AC he'd installed himself, a salvaged Frigidaire from a job site, cleaned up and charged with fresh refrigerant. It hummed at night, a low, steady vibration that had become the closest thing to a lullaby he'd known in years. The apartment was austere, bordering on monastic, but it was quiet. No accusations in the kitchen. No shifts in temperature calibrated to punish him. No smiles that turned on and off like a thermostat set to someone else's comfort. He slept through the night here, every night, for the first time in years. Spencer got fired in February. Victor made the call on a Tuesday morning from a payphone outside a laundromat on Camelback, one of the last working payphones in central Phoenix, which felt appropriate for the act itself. Outdated, slightly pathetic, effective. He called the gym's corporate office, didn't give his name. Reported that Spencer Caldwell, independent contractor and personal trainer at the 7th Street location, had been conducting personal training sessions off the books, taking cash from clients directly, bypassing the gym's commission structure and violating his contractor agreement. All true. All information Spencer had shared freely during their alliance, bragging about the hustle over coffee at the grinder, never imagining the words would come back with teeth. Spencer was terminated within the week. His client list scattered. The BMW lease went back to the dealer. Victor heard through the gym's front desk. He still serviced the HVAC there that Spencer had moved to Tucson. Or Flagstaff, nobody was sure. Nobody cared enough to ask. Victor felt a brief, sharp satisfaction that faded into something muddier. He'd weaponized a confidence. Used information given in trust, however compromised that trust was, as a weapon. It was the right thing to do, he told himself. Spencer had slept with his wife. Spencer had kicked his gnome. But right and clean weren't the same thing, and Victor was learning that the space between them was where most of real life happened. Kelsey moved to Apache Junction in March, into Catherine's manufactured home. 700 square feet, 1 bedroom, a pull-out couch that Kelsey slept on because Catherine, despite taking her daughter in, was not giving up the bedroom. The $5,000 was a wall between them, invisible, permanent, load-bearing. They fought over everything. The thermostat, the remote, who finished the milk, whether the screen door should stay latched at night. The fights had the specific, grinding quality of two women who knew each other's weaknesses with surgical precision and deployed that knowledge nightly. The trailer park was quiet by 10. Coyotes in the distance, the hum of the Superstition Freeway, the occasional pop of a screen door from a neighbor stepping out for a cigarette. Victor knew all of this because Marcus told him. Marcus heard it from Catherine's neighbor, a woman named Donna who came into his office for a DUI consultation and mentioned, unprompted, that the Ruiz girl and her mother are at each other's throats every night. Victor listened, filed it, felt nothing in particular. He was learning that indifference arrived not as a decision, but as an absence, the slow draining of a reservoir he hadn't realized he was emptying. The pool table still listed to the left. Victor noticed it as he walked in, the same lean, the same warped rail on the far side, the same felt worn thin where 1,000 bad breaks had been taken by 1,000 men making decisions at the bottom of a beer glass. The dive bar on Van Buren hadn't changed. In a city where everything was foreclosing, flipping, or falling apart, there was something perversely comforting about a bar that committed to staying exactly as bad as it had always been. Marcus was already at the bar. 2 beers, 2 coasters, the folder between them thinner this time, the last folder. "So," Victor said, sitting down. "So," Marcus slid a beer across the bar top. "It's done. Judge Morales signed off last week. Final decree. And the debt. 80-20, her favor, meaning not in her favor. 80% of the marital debt is assigned to Kelsey. The credit cards, the deficiency balance, all of it. 20% is yours. You'll carry about 9 grand. She'll carry the rest." Victor picked up the beer, set it down without drinking. How? How did we get 80-20? Because the marital waste argument worked. The luxury goods in the attic. The Vegas expenses. The credit cards she opened without your knowledge. The recordings of her planning to leave once the money landed. And your income reduction was consistent with every other HVAC tech in the valley. The judge didn't impute. He looked at the construction numbers, looked at the layoff rates, and accepted it. That easy? Nothing about the last year has been easy, Victor, but on paper the math was clear. She spent the money, you documented it, the judge did what judges do. Victor finally drank. The beer was cold and cheap and tasted like every other beer he'd had in this bar, which was comforting in the way that consistency is always comforting, especially when everything else has been rearranged. "What do I owe you?" Victor asked. Marcus shook his head. "Friend discount. Marcus, you owe me for the beer at your place, the weekend we packed. I drank a 6-pack and sat on a Craigslist couch. You can buy me a steak dinner sometime. We're square." You spent a year on this. You're a DUI lawyer who Googled his way through a divorce case. And I won, which means either I'm a better lawyer than I thought or the case was so strong a trained monkey could have won it. Marcus paused. Don't tell me which one. Victor almost smiled. The jukebox was playing something by Waylon Jennings. The pool table waited under its crooked light, same as always. Thank you, Marcus. Go build something, that's all the thanks I need. 3 weeks later, Victor pulled into a Circle K on a patchy trail to fill up his truck. He was coming back from a residential call in Gold Canyon, a retired couple whose heat pump had frozen over. A simple fix, 45 minutes, $80 cash. The kind of work that kept the lights on. He pulled up to pump 3, killed the engine, and walked inside to prepay because the card reader on the pump was broken. He saw her before she saw him. Kelsey was behind the register. She was wearing a Circle K polo, red, a size too large, the collar fraying. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup. No concealer, no foundation, no carefully blended anything. Her face was bare and older than her 30 years, the lines around her eyes deeper than they should have been, her posture settled into the permanent slouch of a person who stands on concrete for 8 hours a day and has stopped caring who notices. She looked up, recognized him, her hands stilled on the register. Victor! Kelsey! A silence, not hostile, not warm. The dead, neutral silence of two people standing in the wreckage of something that used to be a shared life, neither sure what tone to use because all the old tones, angry, loving, accusatory, flirtatious, belonged to a structure that no longer existed. You working here? He asked. A stupid question. Obviously she was working here. But the alternative was saying nothing, and saying nothing felt worse. Since November, the dental office let me go after everything. They said it was disruptive to the practice environment. She made air quotes, a small, tired gesture. So now I sell scratchers and fountain drinks to retirees, the great American pivot. Victor set a 20 on the counter. Pump 3. She rang it up. Her fingers moved on the register with the competence of someone who had learned the machine and nothing more, who showed up and did the job and went home and did it again, which was Victor recognized with a discomfort he didn't want, exactly what he had done for years, except nobody had ever looked at his uniform and seen failure. Victor! He was turning to go. He stopped. Was it real? She asked. The inheritance from Indiana, was any of it ever real? Her voice was different, not the chipper voice, not the rage voice, not the seductive voice she'd used over carne asada and candles. Something stripped of all those layers, something underneath, the voice of a woman asking a question she needed answered not because the answer would change anything, but because not knowing was its own kind of prison. She needed it to have been real, not for the money. She was past the money, or close to past it. She needed the hope to have been real, the idea that there had been a moment when the universe had offered something good, and she had simply failed to hold on to it. That was more bearable than the truth, that the hope itself was manufactured, that the inheritance was bait, that she had been played with the same precision she had used to play everyone else. Victor looked at her. He could tell the truth, could say, no, Kelsey, I made it up. There was no uncle, no estate, no money. I invented it to see if you loved me or the idea of money, and you answered the question in 48 hours with carne asada and candles. He could say that. It would be honest. It would be merciful, even in a way, a clean wound instead of a dirty one. He didn't say that. Yeah, he said. It was real, but I donated every cent to charity just to make sure you'd never see a dime of it. Kelsey's face didn't crumble, it didn't twist or break or shatter, it just settled like a house shifting on its foundation. A small, final adjustment, the last thing moving before everything goes still. She nodded, once, looked down at the register. Pump 3 is ready, she said. Victor walked out. It was the ugliest thing he did in the entire story. The divorce was final. The debt was assigned. The house was gone. He didn't need to twist the knife. But something in him, some residue of grief or wounded pride or the memory of being called a man who peeked at a thermostat, needed her to know that he would rather destroy money than share it with her. It was petty. It was unnecessary. It was a small, poisoned arrow fired at a woman who was already walking away. It proved he wasn't the hero. He was just the one still standing. He walked to his truck. Turned the key, click, nothing. He turned it again. The starter ground once, a sick mechanical cough, and died. The engine didn't catch. The dashboard stayed dark. He sat there. In the cab of his truck, in the Circle K parking lot on a patchy trail, with the pump nozzle still in his tank and the Arizona sun pressing down on the windshield like a hand on a closed book. He could feel her eyes on him through the store window. Could feel her watching from behind the register, the man who had orchestrated her humiliation, the man who had just lied about a fictional inheritance for no reason other than spite, now sitting in a broken truck that wouldn't start, unable to make his dramatic exit. He called for a tow. The dispatcher said 25 minutes. He sat there for 25 minutes, in the heat, in the silence. In the small, merciless knowledge that the universe does not arrange exits for people who think they've earned them. There was no dramatic departure. No heroes walk into the sunset. No engine roaring to life at the perfect moment. Just a man with a broken truck waiting for a tow while his ex-wife watched from behind a gas station window. The moment was small, and it was honest. And it proved something the story had been building toward for a year. Victor Ruiz wasn't a superhero. He was a man with calloused hands and a bad back and a truck that needed a new starter, sitting in a parking lot, surviving. That was all. That was enough. 2 years later, the city started breathing again, not fully. Not the deep, reckless breath of 2006, when every empty lot in Maricopa County was a promise and every mortgage was a handshake, and everyone believed the desert could hold an unlimited number of beige houses with pools nobody could afford to heat. That breath had been a hallucination. What came in 2012 was smaller, quieter. The careful inhale of a city that had been punched in the stomach and was testing whether it could stand. New construction stirred in Tempe and Gilbert. Permits climbed, not spiked, climbed, the way a patient's vital signs improve when the fever breaks. Cranes appeared on the Scottsdale skyline. The "We Buy Ugly Houses" signs thinned out along the freeway frontage roads, replaced by the first tentative "Now Hiring" banners outside new restaurants and retail boxes. Victor noticed because it showed up in his phone. More calls, more service requests, more people building things that needed air conditioning. He owned a company now. Small. 2 men, 1 rented garage bay off Grand Avenue, a used Ford van with a magnetic sign on the door that read Ruiz HVAC licensed, bonded, insured in plain blue letters. No logo, no slogan, no call now for a free estimate. Just the name, the credentials, and a phone number that Victor answered on the first ring every time, because reliability was the only advertising he could afford and the only kind that worked. Travis had earned his Arizona contractor's license 6 months ago, passed on the second try. Victor had bought him a steak dinner at a ranch house on Cave Creek Road and told him he was proud, which was not a thing Victor said often or easily, and which Travis received with the startled gratitude of a young man who hadn't heard it much. They weren't rich. They weren't comfortable. Some months after the garage rent and the van payment and the insurance and the parts and the gas, Victor cleared $2,200. Travis cleared less. They ate lunch out of coolers. They drove to jobs in a van that smelled like refrigerant and packing tape. But they were solvent. They paid their taxes. They answered their phone. They showed up on time, did the work correctly, and left the job site cleaner than they found it. In Phoenix in 2012, that was enough to build something. Leslie called on a Thursday evening in March. Not about work. They hadn't worked together for over a year. She'd left the company 6 months after Victor did, started her own consulting firm, and spent the intervening time doing what Leslie did best, building things quietly and well without fanfare, without performance. "You eat yet?" she asked. "Not yet. I'm making chicken. There's enough for 2 if you're not weird about it." "I'm not weird about it. 7 o'clock, bring nothing." "I have everything." She hung up. That was Leslie, clear, direct. No strategy, no subtext. No warmth deployed as currency and withdrawn as punishment. They'd been dating for 4 months. If you could call it dating, it was more like 2 people who had survived separate disasters discovering that they could sit in the same room without flinching. They cooked dinner on weeknights. Watched baseball on her couch, which was a real couch bought with real money from a real store. She didn't ask about Kelsey. He didn't volunteer. The past existed, acknowledged and filed, but it didn't furnish the rooms they sat in. It wasn't passion. It wasn't cinema. It was 2 people who had seen enough wreckage to recognize steadiness as a form of grace, and who chose it consciously, the way you choose a well-built house over a beautiful one. Victor found it disorienting at first, then calming, then something close to happiness, though he wasn't ready to call it that. He was still learning that comfort didn't have to be a trap. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. White envelope. Return address, Pinnacle Recovery Services. Addressed to Kelsey Ruiz at Victor's apartment on 19th Avenue, an old address, a dead trail, the kind of clerical ghost that collections agencies followed for years because updating records cost money and sending letters cost less. Victor picked up a pen. Wrote not at this address in block letters on the envelope. Dropped it in the outgoing mail slot by the apartment stairs. He felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, not pity, not even the ghost of any of those things. The emotional charge was gone, fully drained like a battery that had been run to zero and couldn't remember the current it once held. He made coffee, drank it black. Went to work. The indifference was the real victory, and he didn't recognize it as one because that's how indifference works. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives as the absence of everything else, and by the time you notice the quiet, the noise has been gone so long you've forgotten what it sounded like. In April, a service call took him back to Merivale. He drove the van down the old streets, past the Fry's, past the strip mall on McDowell where the grinder still sat between the nail salon and the check cashing place, past the elementary school where he used to see kids waiting for the bus in the mornings when he left for work. He turned onto the cul-de-sac. The house was there, but it wasn't his house. New paint, a warm sand color instead of the faded beige. New landscaping, desert willows and agave where the dead grass had been. A new front door, dark wood, no foreclosure notice. A sold sign in the yard from a real estate agency with a woman's smiling face on it. A young couple was unloading boxes from a U-Haul, mid-20s, sunburned already. The woman was carrying a lamp. The man was carrying a box marked kitchen in black marker. They were laughing about something. The box was heavy, the lamp was unwieldy, and they were performing the awkward, hopeful choreography of people starting a life in a house they believed would hold it. The gnome was gone. Of course it was. The flipper would have cleared the yard, tossed everything, started fresh. The gravel where it had lain on its side was smooth now, raked, like it had never been there at all. Victor slowed the van. He didn't stop. The house looked good. Better than it had ever looked when he lived there, which was either ironic or appropriate or both. The walls hadn't lied. The foundation hadn't stolen from anyone. The copper pipes inside were just copper pipes, carrying water from one room to another, doing their job. The house had always been just a structure. The people inside were the ruin. He drove on, turned right on Merivale Drive, got on the 202. The young couple didn't notice the van. They were too busy carrying boxes into their future, which looked from the outside a lot like his past. He hoped their version held. The story ends at sunrise, a Tuesday in May. Victor's truck, new starter, 6 months old, running fine, is parked at the base of a commercial building in North Phoenix. The building is a call center, 1-story, flat roof, 8 RTUs lined up like soldiers, routine maintenance. The kind of job that keeps the lights on. He climbs the ladder. His knees protest on the rungs. The right one clicks now. A new sound. A sound that wasn't there 2 years ago but has become part of the daily inventory of a body that has spent a decade on rooftops in the most sun-punished city in America. His back tightens at the transition from ladder to roof. His hands grip the parapet, calloused and cracked and permanently sun-darkened, the hands of a man who works for a living and has the damage to prove it. The roof is cool. It's early, 6:30 a.m. before the heat sets in. By noon, this surface will be 150 degrees and untouchable, the same temperature it was the day this story started, on a different roof, in a different year, when Victor climbed up as a married man and came down as something else. But right now, in this window, the air is cool and clean. A rare overnight rain passed through, a gift from the monsoon's long memory. And the desert smells like creosote and damp concrete. That specific mineral green scent that Phoenix produces maybe 15 times a year, and that people who live here wait for the way other people wait for snow. The city spreads below him. Beige and sprawling, the valley floor extending in every direction toward mountain ranges that ring the horizon like low walls. Camelback to the east, catching the first light. South Mountain to the south, still dark, the freeway already humming with commuters. A plane descending toward Sky Harbor, its lights blinking in the gray-blue air. Victor sets his toolbox on the roof, opens it. The tools inside are organized: wrenches, gauges, a refrigerant recovery unit, a voltmeter, each in its place, each functional, each maintained. His father's tools are in the storage unit on the I-17. These are his. He takes a deep breath. His back hurts. His knees ache. His skin will burn again today and tomorrow and every day until the summer ends and the winter brings its brief, beautiful reprieve. He is 34 years old and his body is 45. He owns a van and a toolbox and a small company that might survive or might not. He is dating a woman who is kind to him in ways he is still learning to accept. He carries $9,000 in debt and a contractor's license and the quiet, unremarkable knowledge that he showed up, did the work and didn't quit. He is tired. He is free. He picks up a wrench, walks to the first unit and gets to work.